Her hands tremble as she clutches the phone, her voice breaking through sobs, begging the operator to find her daughter. She hasn't heard from her since the news broke, since the world stopped spinning for a moment in Sydney. Pacific Star Flight 814, a gleaming Boeing 777-2300ER, was supposed to be a routine red-eye from Sydney to Los Angeles, carrying 288 souls, 275 passengers and 13 crew. Families heading to Disneyland, executives chasing deals, students chasing dreams. But at 2:17 a.m., just minutes after takeoff, something went horribly wrong. The plane, a marvel of modern engineering, turned into a blazing inferno. Crashing into a quiet coastal suburb near Sydney's Kingsford Smith Airport, the fireball lit up the night, swallowing homes, dreams, and lives. All but one person on board perished, and 22 residents on the ground were lost. Yet, somehow, a young woman, Amara Chen, seated in 14C, walked out of the wreckage, burned but breathing. How did she survive, and why did this state-of-the-art jet fall from the sky? Stick around, folks, because the truth behind this tragedy will leave you stunned. Let's rewind to April 15, 2025. It's a cool, clear night in Sydney. Pacific Star Flight 814 is parked at Gate 53, its silver fuselage gleaming under the airport lights. On board, you've got 275 passengers, 112 Australians, 89 Americans, 44 Chinese, 20 Brits, and a handful of others from all corners of the globe. There are kids clutching stuffed animals, honeymooners snapping selfies, and business travelers sipping coffee, ready for the 13-hour haul across the Pacific. The crew, 13 strong, includes Captain Elena Martinez, a 20-year veteran with 18,000 flight hours, and First Officer Liam Patel, a sharp 32-year-old with a reputation for precision. The Boeing 777-300R, powered by two massive GE 90115B engines, is one of the safest and most reliable aircraft ever built. It's a beast, capable of carrying nearly 400 people across continents without breaking a sweat. Everything checks out: pre-flight inspections, fuel load, weather reports, clear skies, light winds, no red flags. At 2:12 a.m., the plane rolls down runway 34L, engines roaring, and lifts off smoothly. For 90 seconds, everything is perfect. Then, chaos. At 2:14 a.m., air traffic control hears a garbled transmission from Flight 814. The first officer's voice cuts through, sharp and panicked. "Mayday, Mayday, we're losing control." The tower responds, but there's no reply. Eyewitnesses on the ground, residents of Maroubra, a sleepy beachside suburb, describe a terrifying sight. The plane, barely 1,000 feet up, seems to wobble, its nose pitching erratically. One witness, a retired fisherman, swears it looked like the jet was fighting to stay alive, like a wounded bird. Then, at 2:17 a.m., it plummets, smashing into a row of homes on Fitzgerald Avenue. The impact is catastrophic. A massive explosion engulfs the neighborhood, sending flames and debris skyward. Houses collapse, cars melt, and the air fills with acrid smoke. On board, 287 lives are lost instantly. On the ground, 22 residents, including a family of 5, perish in the blaze. Firefighters and paramedics rush to the scene, but the devastation is overwhelming. Charred wreckage scatters across streets, and the smell of jet fuel lingers for days. Yet, amidst this nightmare, one person defies the odds. Amara Chen, a 24-year-old graphic designer from Melbourne, seated in 14C, somehow survives. She's found crawling from the wreckage, her clothes shredded, her arms and face burned, but alive. She later tells rescuers she felt a weird stillness just before the crash, like the plane was suspended in time. She remembers unbuckling her seatbelt and stumbling through a jagged hole in the fuselage, guided by instinct. Aviation experts are baffled. Seat 14C isn't near an emergency exit, and the impact should have been unsurvivable. Her survival is a miracle, but it comes with a heavy cost. Her best friend, sitting beside her in 14D, didn't make it. Amara's mother, still on that desperate phone call, learns her daughter is alive but broken, physically and emotionally. The world watches in horror as news spreads. Social media explodes with grainy videos from bystanders, showing the glowing wreckage against the night sky. Posts from Sydney residents describe the ground shaking, windows shattering, and a deafening roar. Within hours, Australia's Transport Safety Bureau ATSB launches an investigation. Joined by experts from the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, Boeing and GE Aerospace. The stakes are sky-high. The Boeing 777 is a workhorse of global aviation, and Pacific Star, a rising airline under the Pacific Alliance Group, is fighting to protect its reputation. The black box's flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder are recovered within 48 hours, found amid the rubble of a destroyed home. These devices hold the key to what went wrong, capturing every detail of Flight 814's final moments. Let's talk about what they found, because this is where things get wild. The flight data recorder shows the plane took off normally, with engines performing as expected, thrust, speed, altitude all green. But at 90 seconds airborne, the data shows a sudden spike in pitch angle, followed by a rapid loss of airspeed. The plane was climbing too steeply, almost like it was trying to rocket into space. Then, the stall warnings blare. For those who don't know, a stall isn't the engines quitting, it's when the wings lose lift because the plane's angle or speed is off. The 777 was flying too slow, too steep, and it couldn't recover. The cockpit voice recorder paints a chilling picture. Captain Martinez is heard shouting, "What's happening? Pull back," while First Officer Patel yells, "We're stalling." Alarms scream in the background. Stick shaker, terrain warnings. The works. The crew had seconds to react, but it was too late. The plane dropped like a stone. So, what caused this? Was it a mechanical failure? Those GE90 engines are beasts, designed to keep running even if a bird or debris gets sucked in. Did they both fail at once? Unlikely. Eyewitnesses reported no engine flames or explosions before the crash, and the data confirms the engines were still running. Could it have been a design flaw in the 777? Boeing's 777 has a near-spotless safety record, with over 1,700 built and billions of passenger miles flown. Maybe it was the weather. Nope, conditions were clear. Or was it something more sinister, like sabotage? I know what you're thinking, conspiracy theories are tempting, but hold that thought. The investigators dug deeper, and what they found was jaw-dropping. It wasn't a bomb, a bird strike, or a faulty engine. It was something far simpler, far more human, and far more devastating. Before I spill the beans, let's talk about the aftermath. Because this tragedy didn't just end with a crash. The Maroubra neighborhood is a war zone. Homes are reduced to ash, families displaced, and survivors traumatized. First responders describe scenes they'll never unsee: children's toys melted into the pavement, personal belongings scattered among twisted metal. Identifying victims is a nightmare. Most bodies are burned beyond recognition, forcing coroners to rely on DNA, dental records, and even fragments of jewelry. Families gather at a makeshift memorial, leaving flowers, photos, and notes. 1x post from a local reads, "I lost my neighbor, my friend, my home. How do we move on?" Pacific Star sets up a crisis center, offering counseling and compensation, but no amount of money can erase the pain. The airline's stock plummets, and its rebranding campaign, a glossy push to compete with Qantas and United, takes a brutal hit. Back to Amara Chen, the lone survivor. She's in a Sydney hospital, recovering from second-degree burns and a fractured arm. Reporters swarm, calling her the miracle of Flight 814. But Amara doesn't feel like a miracle. She's haunted by the screams, the heat, the moment she realized her friend was gone. She tells a journalist, "I don't know why I'm here," and she isn't. It doesn't make sense. Her story goes viral, with ex-users sharing her photo, a young woman with bandaged arms, staring blankly at the camera. Some call her a hero, others question how she escaped. Aviation experts weigh in, saying her survival defies logic. The 777's cabin was obliterated, yet she walked away. Was it luck, fate, or something else? Now, let's get to the heart of it. The ATSB, with help from Boeing and the NTSB, pieces together the puzzle. The black box data reveals a sequence of events that's almost unbelievable. During takeoff, the pilots entered incorrect data into the flight management computer, the system that tells the plane how to fly. Specifically, they input a takeoff weight that was 50 tons lighter than the actual weight of the fully loaded 777. This threw off the calculations for the V-speed's critical speeds for takeoff and climb. The plane was set to climb at a speed too low and an angle too steep for its actual weight. When the pilots engaged the autopilot, the system followed the faulty settings, pitching the nose up aggressively. The airspeed dropped, the wings stalled, and the plane lost lift. The crew tried to correct it manually, but at low altitude, with only seconds to react, they had no chance. How does something like this happen? The 777's cockpit is packed with redundancies, checklists, cross-checks, and warnings. The pilots should have caught the error during pre-flight. Captain Martinez and First Officer Patel were experienced, but investigators found signs of fatigue. The crew had flown a grueling schedule, with back-to-back long hauls and minimal rest. Pacific Star's scheduling pushed them to the limit, and the overnight departure didn't help. The cockpit voice recorder reveals rushed communication, with Patel reading the weight data and Martinez confirming without double-checking. A simple typo entering 240 tons instead of 290 tons set the chain in motion. The plane's systems warned of the stall, but the pilots, so overwhelmed by alarms and disoriented by the sudden pitch, couldn't recover in time. This wasn't a mechanical failure. It wasn't sabotage or a freak accident. It was human error, plain and simple, amplified by systemic issues. The ATSB's preliminary report points to deeper problems: inadequate rest protocols, rushed pre-flight checks, and a culture that prioritized schedules over safety. The 777 is a technological marvel, with computers that can fly it from Sydney to LA with minimal human input. Yet all that tech couldn't stop a basic mistake. Boeing and GE Aerospace breathe a sigh of relief there. Hardware isn't to blame, but Pacific Star faces scrutiny. Why were pilots overworked? Why weren't checklists enforced? The public demands answers, and X is buzzing with outrage. One user posts, "How do you mess up something so basic?" This is on the airline, not just the pilots. The fallout is massive. Australian regulators ground all Pacific Star 777s for inspections. The airline cancels flights, stranding thousands. Boeing shares dip as public confidence wavers, even though the plane itself wasn't at fault. Families of the victims file lawsuits, and Maroubra residents demand compensation for their destroyed homes. The crash site becomes a somber landmark, with candlelight vigils drawing hundreds. Among the victims are stories that break your heart. A young couple headed to their wedding in LA, a professor mentoring students in aerospace, a single dad taking his kids to see their grandparents. Each life leaves a void, and the grief ripples across continents. Amara Chen's survival remains the focal point. She's released from the hospital 3 weeks later, but her recovery is far from over. She avoids the media, haunted by survivors' guilt. In a rare interview, she says, "I keep replaying those seconds. Why me? Why not her?" Her story resonates with ex-users sharing messages of support and others speculating about her escape. Some claim she must have had divine intervention. Others say it's just physics, maybe a quirk of the wreckage shielded her. Experts can't agree, but they admit survival in such a crash is a 1 in a million shot. As the ATSB prepares its final report, the aviation world grapples with hard truths. The crash of Flight 814 wasn't about a faulty plane or bad weather. It was about people overworked, overstressed, and all too human. The 777's advanced systems couldn't save it from a single wrong number. This tragedy exposes a flaw in the industry. No matter how sophisticated the tech, humans are the weak link. Former pilots weigh in, calling the error unforgivable but understandable under pressure. They point to fatigue as a silent killer, with airlines cutting corners to maximize profits. The data backs this up. Studies show pilot fatigue contributes to 20% of aviation incidents. Pacific Star vows to overhaul its operations. They announce strict arrest protocols and mandatory double checks for critical data. But for the families, it's too little, too late. They want justice, not promises. One father, who lost his son, posts on X, "My boy was 19, studying to be a doctor. They took him from me over a typo." The airline CEO faces a grilling at a press conference, dodging questions about cost-cutting and pilot welfare. Meanwhile, Maroubra rebuilds, but the scars remain. A community center is planned at the crash site, a place to honor the 309 lives lost, 287 on board, 22 on the ground. So what does this mean for aviation? Is it still safe to fly? The stats say yes, air travel remains the safest mode of transport, with a 1 in 11 million chance of a fatal crash. But Flight 814 reminds us that safety isn't just about tech. It's about the people behind the controls, the systems behind the schedules, and the culture behind the profits. Could better training have caught the error? Could stricter regulations, who have saved those lives? These questions linger, and they're worth asking. The crash wasn't just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call. For now, Amara Chen tries to move forward. She's back in Melbourne, sketching again, but her art has changed, darker, more abstract, reflecting the fire and loss. Her mother keeps that phone call in her heart, the moment she learned her daughter was alive. The world moves on, but for those touched by Flight 814, the pain is eternal. So, what do you think? Was this just a human mistake, or is there a bigger flaw in how airlines operate? Could technology ever outsmart our errors, or are we doomed to repeat them? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories that dig deep. Thanks for sticking with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.